What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's project is this Echo string trimmer, and the problem is that I just picked it up off the curb for free and I don't know anything about it. Let's take a good look at it, find out what's wrong with it, and hopefully we can fix it. In this video, we try and repair this trimmer. However, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. So I saw an ad online for free items on the curb, some furniture, and yard equipment, and this trimmer was one of those items. Luckily, the address was only a few miles away, and the ad was recently posted, so I had no problems picking it up. I did clean the grass around the guard and the lower part of the drive shaft, but I will say one thing about this trimmer: it's in excellent condition, so I was quite surprised that they were giving it away. Unfortunately, by the end of this video, the answer will be quite obvious as to why I think it was given away. The first thing I did when I got it back to the house was to slowly pull on the rope and feel if the engine is fighting back, and I'm glad to report that it was fighting back quite well, so I don't think the engine is worn out. Now, there's still some fuel in the tank, so I want to try and get it started with it. I'll make sure that the kill switch is not in the off position and then prime the fuel system. You want to press the purge bulb till it fills up with fuel and comes out of the yellow fuel line on the left side of the carb. If the bulb doesn't fill up, then the engine is not likely to start. Ours is filling up nicely, so I'll try starting it. So it didn't even try and start. Now there's either no fuel getting to the engine, which means we have a carb issue, or there's no spark getting to the plug. Now to test the spark issue, I'm going to use a spark checker. You can buy these online for only a few dollars, and to use it, just install it in line with the spark plug, pull the rope, and watch for an orange glow in the tester. Now with the trimmer moving around the table, it's really tough to see the glow, so I had to freeze the video to show you that we do have an orange glow in the tester, and that means we do have a working ignition system, which is great news. Now if we didn't see an orange glow, there might be a problem with the on-off switch or the ignition coil. The next thing to do is to pour out the fuel to examine it, and then pour our own fresh fuel in the tank and see if we can get it started then. So the fuel in the tank is a pink color, so they must have been using a really good 2-cycle oil. However, it doesn't smell like gasoline anymore. That means it's been in there for a very long time. Now gasoline has a very short shelf life, so it's probably the reason why it wouldn't start. I also noticed that there was something else in the tank that shouldn't be there. After a few minutes of struggling, I was able to get it out. I believe it's a locking safety cap for a newer style gas can. I've never seen anybody lose one of these in the tank before. Now, while I'm here, I do want to check to make sure that the fuel filter is still connected to the fuel line. If yours is not connected, then you'll need to inspect your carb for a clogged inlet screen. Now, ours is still connected, so I'll just put it back in the tank. However, we're still going to inspect the carb if the engine doesn't start. So the engine still didn't start, and that means we might have a carb issue. The next thing I want to do is put some fuel in the carb's throat and try starting it. I also want to check and make sure that the air filter isn't wet with fuel. If it is wet with fuel, then it won't allow air to get into the engine. Ours is still dry and clean, so that isn't the reason why our engine isn't starting. After putting some fuel into the carb's throat, it finally started and ran for a few seconds, which is great news. That means that the carb isn't getting any fuel to the engine, and we need to remove it and inspect it for any issues. However, I would like to take this opportunity to use my compression tester to see how healthy this engine is. You can buy these online for less than $20, and to use it, just install it into the spark plug hole, squeeze the trigger, and pull the rope several times or until the needle stops. The tester measures how much pressure your engine can make on the compression stroke. We want to see a number well over 100 psi, and the higher the better. The number I'd like to see is something close to 150. With the spark plug out of the engine, I noticed something troubling with this spark plug. The color of the porcelain and the ground strap are white instead of brown. Now, considering this engine may have been ran for at least a few hours, it's not supposed to look this way. What it's telling me is that the engine hasn't been getting enough fuel for a very long time, which means that this engine might have had idling issues. So the reading is 130 psi, which isn't bad at all. It shows that the engine does have some wear, but it's still very healthy. One more thing I want to check that could affect the compression test is a clogged exhaust system. The main culprit is a spark arrestor screen, which could get clogged with carbon from the engine. To get to the screen, we need to remove the top cover and then remove the bolts for the exhaust deflector. If the screen is clogged, you can burn the carbon off using a lighter or a torch. So here's the screen, and as you can see, there's almost no carbon on it. In fact, you can actually see the original color of the screen along the edges. That means that this engine has not been ran very much at all. That also means that the compression reading isn't being affected by a clogged exhaust system. We'll just reinstall the screen, the deflector, and the top cover. Then we'll take off the carb so we can inspect it. The main things we want to check for is a working metering and pumping diaphragm, and that fuel flows through the inlet screen. Taking a closer look at these fuel lines, I can see they've been damaged by ethanol gas. The return line is a bit stiffer than normal, and the black filter line is a bit softer than it's supposed to be. We don't need to replace them just yet as they're not cracked or leaking, so we'll just use them until we know the engine runs and the trimmer cuts grass. Then we can make the investment in time and money to replace the lines. After taking off this metal plate, you can see the metering diaphragm, and as expected, it has hardened over time. It should be flexible, but as you can hear, it sounds like I'm tapping on a piece of cardboard, so we need to replace it. Now, the reason why this engine wasn't getting any fuel is that the diaphragm is supposed to be pressing on a rocker arm to allow fuel to flow through the carb. However, the diaphragm is hardened away from the rocker arm, which would keep any fuel from flowing through it. So here's the diaphragm, and we need to take a good look at it so we can find the right replacement. This one has 3 large holes and 1 smaller hole to help locate it. The other part that's important is the stem in the middle of this metal disc. The stem can either be long or short, and this one has the short stem. Next, we'll take off the pumping section to look at the inlet screen. So this is the inlet screen, and as you can see, there's some debris on the screen that we need to remove. The issue is that we can't safely clean it till we take off the needle and rocker arm assembly. Before we take it off, I want to test the flow through the screen by putting some fuel on it and then pressing the rocker arm. The fuel should disappear on the screen, and unfortunately, it's not doing that, so we need to clean the screen and clear the passageway as well. Normally, we wouldn't need to remove this gasket, but it is in our way. Just be very careful because if you break this gasket, you'll need to buy a carb rebuild kit, which can be very confusing trying to find the right one you need. Also, be careful when taking off the rocker arm needle and spring. If you drop any one of these pieces, trying to find it can be extremely tough. Once they're off the carb, we can start cleaning the screen with some carb cleaner. What we're looking for is the carb cleaner to actually pass through the screen. Unfortunately, it's not disappearing, so we're going to have to lightly agitate the screen using a small screwdriver. If that doesn't work, we'll need to remove the screen and let it soak. While it's doing that, we can then clear out the passage using some more cleaner. While the screen is soaking, this gives us time to pick the right metering diaphragm. So I usually carry 3 common types. The first type has 4 large holes and 2 smaller locating holes, and the stem in the middle is the longer one. So that means that this is not the one we need. The second one I carry also has a long stem, so I'm not even going to worry about how many holes it has. Now the last one has the correct number of holes, and the most important part is that the stem in the middle is the short one. After taking one out of the bag and comparing it to the original one, I think we have a match. After several minutes, I removed the screen from its bath and then installed it into the carb, followed by the needle and rocker arm assembly. Now once back on, check to make sure that the arm is returning back to its normal position. We'll also do a flow test here in a bit, but first we need to tackle a very sticky topic. Now this carb does have an H screw for high engine speed fuel adjustment, but they've hidden it under this black cap. To remove the cap, use a small drill bit and heat up the tip, then press it into the cap. Let the drill bit cool down, and after a minute or so, the cap should come out with the drill bit. It might take more than one attempt to get this to work right. Now under the cap, you should see a slot for a screwdriver. There's also supposed to be an L screw for low engine speed fuel adjustment on top of the barrel in the middle of the brass section, but I don't see that it's capped off. This is usually capped off with a brass plug, but I don't think I can adjust this one, so they didn't bother hiding it. After filling the inlet screen with fuel for the flow test, fortunately, this time the fuel passed through the screen. That means we can now start putting the carb back together. Now just remember to put the gasket on the carb first, followed by the new metering diaphragm. Just as a reminder, if you don't want to go through all this hassle of cleaning, flow testing, and choosing the correct metering diaphragm, then just replace the carb with a new one. Before we put the pumping section back on, check to make sure that these two check valve flaps are flat and parallel with the rest of the diaphragm. The easiest way is to look at it from the side. Now this one is fine, so we can reuse it. If yours are bent up or down, you might want to consider a rebuild kit. Also, since we're here, I'm also going to replace the purge bulb. These can be bought online for a few dollars, and if you buy more than one, you'll get a better deal. These don't last very long, so buying a pack of 5 wouldn't hurt, and these are easy to replace without taking the carb off the engine. Once the carb is back together, we can finally install it onto the engine. Then we can put some fuel into the tank, prime the fuel system, and try starting it. If we have a hard time keeping the engine idling, I'm not sure if there's much we can do since we only have an adjustment for high speed and not low engine speed. We'll try and use the H screw, but it may not work. Now, just for your information, if you buy an aftermarket carb, both high and low adjustment screws will not be hidden, so you can fine-tune the carb to your engine. So when pressing the bulb, the fuel will come up through the filter line into the carb and fill the bulb, then it should leave through the return line and back to the tank. Now ours seems to be working just fine, so we can try starting it. If your bulb doesn't fill up, then the engine is very unlikely to start. Also, if your fuel comes up through the return line first, stop pressing the bulb and swap the lines on the carb. So the engine doesn't want to stay running, and more than likely it's because there's not enough fuel coming from the carb. The only screw that we can turn is the H screw, so we'll try turning it counterclockwise a quarter turn and see if that makes any difference. So it really didn't seem to make much of a difference, but I'll turn the screw another quarter turn, but I'm afraid it's not going to do much either. When it starts up, I'll also be turning the idle adjustment screw to see if I can keep it from dying. Now, even though it stayed running a bit longer, it's still not wanting to idle. This is when I got desperate. I'm going to take the carb off and look to see if there is an L screw or if I can enlarge the jet inside the carb. For this part, I'll be taking off the barrel assembly. Now, after taking off the assembly, we can kind of see how this carb works. There's a tube where the needle sits to control fuel flow into the airstream. On the other side of the tube might be a brass jet that I can adjust. To see the jet, we'll need to take off the metering diaphragm. After taking off the diaphragm, unfortunately, there isn't a brass jet that we can adjust. Next, I want to try and drill out the top of the barrel and see if there is a screw there that I just can't see. Sorry, I didn't show drilling the top of the barrel, but to my surprise, there is a slot for a flathead screwdriver. However, I don't see how I can turn it, as it doesn't look like there are any threads around it. And when I do try to turn it, it doesn't want to turn either. In hindsight, I think the nut might be a jam nut, and the screwdriver slot may allow me to turn the entire needle assembly, but at the time, I didn't think about that. So this is when I got kind of desperate. Now, turning the screw on the top of the barrel basically moves this needle up or down. In my situation, I need it to move down, and since I can't move it, I'll think I'll move the barrel up. That way it basically does the same thing. Unfortunately, I won't be able to fine tune it, so I'll try to make a slight adjustment, then I'll put the carb back together for another test run. After a minute of careful adjusting, I can see that the tip of the needle is closer to the middle of the opening than before. Now, I think I might have adjusted it too much, but I still want to try it and see if it made any difference. So the engine is now idling and not dying, and that means the adjustment worked. However, there's just a little too much fuel at low speeds, so much so that the H screw doesn't have any effect on the engine. If I could adjust it again, I would move the needle halfway between where it is now and where it was at the beginning. Then the H screw would be able to adjust fuel delivery at high engine speeds again. I also want to look at the spark plug and see just how rich the engine is running. So here's a side-by-side comparison of the two plugs, and as you can see, the plug used to be white and now it's a dark brown. So that would confirm that the engine is running just a bit rich with fuel. Now to be honest, I would rather have my engine run a bit rich with fuel than lean on fuel, as a lean condition could cause higher engine temps, which is not what we want. Another reason why this engine wouldn't want to idle is that there's an air leak at a broken gasket or an O-ring. If that's the case, you would need to pressure test the engine to find the leak and then fix it. Now, I did use this trimmer after filming, and I hate to say it, it was a very uncomfortable experience. I felt like it was my first time using a trimmer. I found it uncomfortable to hold, and the guard kept hitting the ground, causing me to scalp the grass. I think it has to do with the angle of the curved shaft. Now, I'm not very tall, but I think it was designed for someone shorter than me. I hate to say it, but I don't want to use this trimmer. In fact, I might give it away because I don't want to use it again. I wonder if the previous owner felt the same way and decided not to use it for a long time and eventually just gave it away instead. So my question is, what do you think I should do with this trimmer? Should I put it on the curb and list it in the free section of an online market, or maybe I can find a straight shaft to replace the curved one? Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions, and I hope to see you in the next video.